What is going on, my friends, and welcome back to another video on the channel. Now, I told you guys the videos that I'm going to make on Terra Luna are going to slow down quite substantially. That's why in the last two videos I was covering Bitcoin and covering Matic. I'm going back to covering the things in which I do think have a more bright future, of course, but I know that many of you are still interested in Luna, and I told you that if anything significant happens or comes out, I will cover it just for your entertainment and to be able to give you guys the information and the knowledge that I have on it, and if I think it's feasible. And so in today's video, we're going to be covering the Terra ecosystem revival plan that was proposed by Wont himself and why I am not quite sure that this would work from a fundamental based perspective. Okay, so what we got from Wont was basically just the introduction. I'm not going to cover this thing, word for word because many other influencers have. I just want to give more of my opinion on it. But basically, just to start, he basically goes off to say that there are still several $billions worth of UST, but the value of Luna token has been diluted so substantially that there is no way to recover UST at this point. He says that even if it gets repegged, there will be just so little value in Luna in juxtaposition to UST that there's just no way that they would be able to bring UST from the ashes. And going into the future, there's just simply no way that people would be able to ever trust UST again as an algorithmically backed stablecoin. So for that reason, of course, he has kind of just given up on the idea of UST itself. Now, one thing that he goes on to do is he talks about some of their successes, which we can cover one day. Of course, I would just say the biggest thing we need to focus on is going forward, because even with all of the beautiful successes that there were just as many bad things and, lives hurt in the last couple of weeks, of course. So I definitely wouldn't focus too much on history right now because it's not the best. So let's talk about going forward. So looking at this idea, so basically what the Terra ecosystem revival plan or is going to be, is this is a proposal again, so it's not set in stone. But the idea here is for the validators to reset the network ownership back to $1 billion or $1 billion tokens, which will then be distributed out amongst a certain percentage of each one of these groups. So 40% would go out to Luna holders prior to the depegging event, the last tick at $1 before the depeg on UST. So basically anyone who was holding Luna before all of this fuckery started, they're going to be the ones to get 40% all distributed out amongst them. Then we would see 40% go out to UST holders pro rata at the time of the new network upgrade. So these are people who are supporting UST, the ones who are trying to stabilize this ecosystem, and the ones who did, support the stable coin that was supposed to kind of be the backing of this entire ecosystem. That group would then receive an equal 40%. Then we would see that 10% would be distributed out to Luna holders at the final moment of the chain halt, which happened, I believe, yesterday. And so for that reason, of course, what that says is that they are trying to reward people who are still holding on for dear life as this thing was going down, the people who stuck around the longest, and the ones who are trying their best to help, add some buying pressure to counter the dilution that was happening. They're going to be rewarding them with an extra 10%. And then, of course, 10% would be going towards the community pool to fund future development. Now, I'm going to go into each one of these in a second here. I'm going to kind of talk about why I just don't think this is going to work, but I do want to go over this call of action a little bit more in depth because I think it is interesting to see where his mindset's at right now that we are post destruction, right? So why does this redistribution make sense? Well, UST holders need to own a large share of the network. As the network's debt holders, they deserve to be compensated for the tokens they have been holding to the end. Terra needs a community to continue to grow and make its block space valuable again. The only way to do this is to make sure that token holders before the attack commence, the most loyal community members and builders stick around to keep providing value. It is a hard balance and no easy answers in redistributing value within the network, but value must be distributed to allow the ecosystem to survive, and in its current state, it will not. So let me talk a little bit about why this doesn't work and why it's a little bit contradicting. So what we see here, okay, is the overall idea that he starts off by saying there are still several $1 billion worth of UST. Now, we all know what's happened to UST. UST is gone, okay? But what that means is that there are still several $1 billion worth of UST that are still within the protocol or just being held right now that are going to be worthless, okay? Worthless. People who have lost everything, okay? Now, the issue with that is that going forward, the game plan is to distribute 40% of the total redistribution if they do go forward with this. Of course, it's just a proposal, but if they do go forward with this, 40% of the current new token, basically, that would be distributed, would go out to UST holders. So one thing that needs to be understood is there are still several $1 billion that are being lost. And so understand something is that, first of all, a redistribution doesn't add value to a network, right? You can't just do a redistribution and it adds value. You can't print money out of nowhere. This isn't going to change the market cap. This isn't going to change anything but the total circulating supply of what would really realistically be a new token. So therefore, it could have a brighter future in the sense that the supply isn't 6 trillion, is down to 1 billion. So it definitely, in terms of supply, would be an easier route to the top. But overall, I mean, all the holders who are holding are still equally diluted as they were before. It's just the total supply is less, meaning that the overall idea of getting back to higher prices wouldn't be as difficult as it is now, in a sense. But the issue is that with the billions of dollars that are being lost currently, that are still within UST, we have to know that the moment that we would see those people who just lost all of their money in UST receive this new type of token or receive some type of value at all from a redistribution here, they're going to get, the majority of them are going to get out, right? The majority of them are holding their UST right now with the hopes that it repegs one day so they can get out of it and just get rid of it, which, will that work? I have no idea, genuinely, but those are people at the most of losses of anyone who, started this thing, right? So for that reason, considering that half of these tokens are going to be distributed out to UST holders as a whole, half of UST holders are already got out because they either lost a lot of money, lost trust or something, and the other half are still just sitting in there waiting to realistically see nothing. I mean, to see the bottom of this endless pit, okay? So one thing we have to understand is that the trust will never be there again, right? I mean, that is very, very likely. The trust is not going to be there, and you're distributing out some tokens to a bunch of people who are at extreme losses. That is the easiest formula for people to take whatever profits they can and get out, which likely does cause this thing to continuously see falls and falls and falls. Now, one thing we also have to consider is that without UST, right, that was kind of the staple of Luna, right? And let's just be realistic here. That is what made Luna different. That is what made Luna exciting. We all knew, I mean, we were all thinking back, back earlier on whenever this thing had first started, that Luna was the staple. Luna was the staple of algorithmically backed stablecoins. Having UST as an algorithmically backed stablecoin is what made Luna so popular. It gave it the ability to see 20% returns on Anchor Protocol, which is realistically the thing that caused Luna itself, the ecosystem, Terra Luna, to grow. Right? And so whenever you remove something like UST, and whenever you remove the incentive of, say, having 20% returns, whenever you remove the one thing that really made you different than all of these other ones, such as a Solana or an ADA Cardano or a Binance or whatever, what realistically is there left? Because we have to understand something. Even ADA Cardano, let's talk about that. Even ADA Cardano, why would people trust Luna more than they trust an ADA, right? Even with ADA down 80-90% at this point, their whole fundamental system hasn't failed. It's not fallen. It's not lost. Or even a Solana with all the problems that it fucking has, right? People would still trust them more. And so even if you break this thing down all the way back to the fundamentals and you start to try to develop the L1, the layer 1, the ecosystem itself, without the trust of people, plus really no competitive edge and no volume, what would really lead to success? That I don't know. So whenever you mix in the idea that all of these people, if they ever get the chance to get out, they are going to get out due to the loss of trust, the lacking of trust going forward, the lacking of this unique competitive edge, such as UST and 20% Anchor Protocol rewards, with something like Anchor just going out the window, without all of these things that made you, I just simply can't see what incentive people would have to trust it again, one, but to prefer it over something that has proven and withstood the test of time, even something like Ethereum with the fees that it has, right? So for that reason, I don't see it. I just simply don't see it. And so for that, I hope I'm not really kind of being the Debbie Downer, but I feel like we're all down at this point. So there's really no Debbie Downing something that's dead. But that's just my honest opinion. I'm just not quite sure how I see that going. And something we also need to consider is that anyone who thinks about buying right now, do understand that if this goes into effect, all of those tokens that are bought now are they're not going to be even factored in to a redistribution, which is the reason why we're starting to see the volume just like drops dramatically, right? So for that reason, I'm just not quite sure. Of course, this thing is a lottery ticket. We saw it today up, what, 2,000% or something like that at one point. But realistically, every time it goes up 2,000%, it's going to fall another 99%. And if you get in at the perfect time, great. You might make a shit ton of money. But how long does that continue to happen? I honestly have no idea. So with that said, again, I don't really mean to kick a dead horse, but at the end of the day, proposing things that just don't address the fundamental flaws that there are in terms of trust, in terms of competitive edge, I just don't see any success in it. So with that said, that's just my opinion. I hope you guys don't hate me too much, especially you fellow lunatics. Again, I still held my position to the very end. It wasn't something that I sold at any given point. And, you know, we just got to be realistic here. So on to bigger and better things. Again, this is kind of just another one of those videos. Like, yeah, if something interesting happens or important happens, I will update you guys about it. But until then, do expect me to go back to my normal Solana, Matic, Ethereum, Bitcoin content. And yeah, so with that said, I will see you all next time. Y'all have an absolutely fantastic weekend. Peace.